definitely. And if he improves, that spot should be his. And then Looney's probably number 2 there. And then with Bell, you can play him at the 5 in a small lineup, or you can play him at the 4. You shouldn't be missing too much. But you look at the top 4 teams out in the West. The Clippers brought back Reggie Jackson, who was lethal for them in the playoffs. And they brought back Nicholas Batum. They brought back Kawhi Leonard, which is the big one. Signed Justice Winslow for some depth. Denver, the 3 seed, brought back their own guys, especially Will Barton was the big one. They added Jeff Green, was a good veteran presence off that bench. He's never reached that superstar potential that some thought he might reach, but he's become a very valuable weapon to have on the bench for contending teams. Phoenix, they went to the finals last year. They bring back Chris Paul, Campaign, some other guys, and then they add JaVale McGee and Elfrid Payton, who, Payton should add some depth, especially if Chris Paul is still dealing with any of the injuries that he was dealing with in the playoffs that Campaign had to step in for. And JaVale McGee just brings that veteran savvy to their group of bigs, and I think he can help DeAndre Ayton grow a little more, just as Chris Paul's helped pretty much their entire team grow. And Utah is the 1 seed. They brought back Mike Conley. They added Rudy Gay, veteran shooter. I don't know if he would necessarily start for them. I mean, maybe. I haven't really looked at their lineup. But he has proven to be one of the best small forwards in the game, at least in his younger years. At this point, he's a valuable piece to definitely a contender with the number 1. They brought in Hassan Whiteside. I mean, they already had Rudy Gobert there, but Whiteside, just a few years ago, was becoming a star center in this league. It hasn't quite panned out that way, but as a number 2 center, that's a really, really good spot for him to kind of rediscover what he had when he was balling out in Miami. And then they also added Eric Paschall in a trade, who is he's a good shooter from the 4 position. I think he can play the 3 and the 4. He's better suited for the 4. Was a very, very good player at Villanova. He was one of the young players that Golden State had, but they shipped him to Utah, and I think that is a really great spot for him to, at worst, be a legitimate scoring option off the bench, and that just adds depth to, Paschall, Gay, Hassan Whiteside. That adds depth to Conley, Mitchell, Gobert, Ingles, I guess. I'm just naming players off the top of my head that I can remember. They also moved on from Derek Favors, but I think they signed enough help in the front court to offset that. And then the 2 remaining playoff teams that we haven't talked about in the West. Portland was the 6th seed, was tied with Dallas in the standings, but lost out on the tiebreaker. They lost Carmelo Anthony, Zach Collins, and his Cantor, but they re-signed Norman Powell, who's a very good wing off the bench for them. They brought in Ben McLemore and Tony Snell, so a little bit of shooting and athleticism out on the wings. Cody Zeller, that's a big guy. His career also hasn't panned out, but I mean, they might as well kick the tires and see what he's got. They got Damian Lillard, they got CJ McCollum, Anthony Simons, Yusuf Nurkic, Harry Giles. I still think they need more bigs to go with Nurkic and Giles, especially losing Cantor and Collins. We'll see what comes out of that. But, I mean, we'll see how Chauncey Billups works out with that. But I still think they're a playoff team, but they could definitely use some more improvement there. They signed some decent pieces, but they might be in the same boat as Dallas, where there's a chance a couple bubble teams will jump over them. Lastly, in the West, the Lakers. Like I said in the last episode, they're up against the cap, and they've been solving it by signing notable veterans to vetmin deals, or close to vetmin deals at least. They signed Carmelo, they signed Dwight Howard, they signed Trevor Ariza, Wayne Ellington, Kent Bazemore. Obviously, they made the trade for Westbrook. We talked about that last time. They got LeBron, Gasol, Anthony Davis, Talen Horton-Tucker. They added Malik Monk as an outside shooter. Again, get another guy who hasn't panned out, but when you're up against the cap, might as well. And they added Kendrick Nunn, who was a breakout player for the Miami Heat, and now gets rewarded with a shot to be impact shooter off the bench for the Lakers. And I think they should be more competitive out there than they were last year with all the injuries they faced. But again, health is a big thing in the game, so a lot of people like them to take the championship or at least compete for a championship. And with all those veterans on there, it's definitely a possibility. Now we'll jump over to the East. I think there's a little less to talk about there. We'll start with the Celtics. They signed Dennis Schroeder as point guard. Probably start for them. He turned down a 4-year, $84 million offer from the Lakers and signed with the Celtics for 1 year, $5.9 million. Big difference, I think, of Schroeder as more of a defensive player with distributing ability on the offensive end and a decent shooter, but he's not a go-to scorer or anything like that. He's what most pretty good point guards are in the NBA. They also brought in Enes Kanter, who, is a solid backup center in the league. He's a 1-year deal, averages a double-double. At one point, he was probably a starting center. I'm not sure he's a lock to be a starter at any point, but he's definitely a good veteran to have off the bench. He definitely knows what he's doing, and become a reliable player in the league. Both Schroeder and Kanter were they're experienced veterans with years in the league, but they're both under 30. Kanter's 29 and Schroeder's 27, so there's still a lot you can do with those guys and with the core that the Celtics have built. But they took a step back last year in terms of record and accomplishments, but they're clearly still feel like they're in the window for that young core of Tatum and Smart and those guys to try to go get a championship. Now I don't think they're a championship team right now, but the moves that Brad Stevens has made as he got promoted to GM, they make it clear that they're trying to compete, which they should. But time will tell if the Celtics have a great year in the East or if they need to hit the reset button again. And then the Nets, they were real close to going to the finals last year. They brought back Blake Griffin and Bruce Brown. They'll have, Durant, Kyrie back from their injuries. They added James Johnson and Patty Mills. Patty Mills, fantastic backup point guard in the league. He's really carved out a great career for himself as a small school prospect from St. Mary's who just took advantage of the situation and took advantage of the playing time, went about it the right way. He's become pretty much the standard for backup point guards in the NBA, in my opinion. And then James Johnson, who I don't want to say star, but he showed flashes of being really, really good, possibly great. A couple years ago, hasn't been playing on the same level, but still a great piece to add as the Nets just get deeper and go after that championship that has eluded them so far. They do lose Spencer Dinwiddie, who's productive backup point guard, but Patty Mills, fills in that spot really well. And they lost Jeff Green. James Johnson kind of fills in with that role. Better scorer, better shooter, not quite the same athlete, but pretty much a pretty good trade-off there. The Hornets just missed the playoffs last year. They too have a young core with Miles Bridges and those guys. They needed to add shooting, I think, because they had some athletic players, but they didn't have guys who could shoot the ball that well from what I saw. They were close to the playoffs last year, and they added a couple guys who could shoot. Devontae Graham's gone, but they added veteran Ish Smith as the backup point guard. He's proven to be a reliable backup point guard in the league and has had some games in his career where he has gone off as a scorer. He shouldn't be counted on as number one option or anything, especially as a backup point guard. But him being there should help them. Also, Kelly Oubre is a young rising player, moved around quite a bit in the league, but if there's one thing that he does well is shoot, and that certainly fits a need in Charlotte. The Miami Heat, probably one of the top contenders in the East this year. They've certainly made their team better. They added a lot of veterans. They gave a max contract to Duncan Robinson, who's a pure shooter, former undrafted player, who's carved out a nice role for them. They brought in guys like Kyle Lowry, Markieff Morris, PJ Tucker. They're all accomplished veterans who have been there and can help the young players who have already accomplished so much themselves as a young team, but can still grow. And those guys can still play at a high level. And they're the perfect type of veteran leaders to add to that team. It's already really deep with Jimmy Butler and Victor Oladipo and Tyler Hero, who hopefully can return to his rookie form, his rookie playoff performances, as opposed to last season. And Bam Adebayo, who was on the Olympic team, and they still have the ageless veteran Udonis Haslem they brought back on a contract. He's been a staple for that franchise and a really good player. And I think they got a really complete roster, and they should compete top 4 spot, at least maybe top 3 in the East. Then you got the Knicks. Needed shooting and star players. They added Kemba Walker. Kind of like what I said about DeRozan, except he's obviously Kemba's much better shooter. Probably rather have Kemba on my team at this point, to be honest. But he's an all-star point guard, incredibly successful. Probably a number 2 option on a really good team. Number 2 scoring option, that is, on a really good team, and not a superstar. He's an all-star for sure, not a superstar. Like I said, they needed shooting. They added, Kemba can shoot decently. Evan Fournier and Alec Burks can certainly shoot. Added Dwayne Bacon, not a great shooter, but he's a long and athletic wing who could probably benefit from the change of scenery and be a solid bench piece, possibly. The big thing is that, while they don't have a legitimate number 1 player, Julius Randle doesn't have to do everything to carry the team anymore like he was last year, and that should make them better. Him and Walker, in terms of NBA stars go, in the grand scheme of things, they're probably both complementary star options, number 2s. So they're still searching for that guy, but it certainly improves the team. And now they seem to have a pretty deep roster. What could help them get over the hump in terms of winning in the playoffs would be, number 1, like I said, adding that star player. And number 2 is probably continue to develop the younger guys like Obi Toppin, RJ Barrett, Kevin Knox, Mitchell Robinson, who have already shown flashes and promise, but just need